Storygram Network.
Hello, thanks for joining me. I'm Jeff Davis. On this podcast, we'll head up and down Napa Valley for a special celebration. Join us as we head out on the wine road.
I feel like CADE is my dream job. This is a beautiful place to make wine and really showcase kind of what Howell Mountain can do and what I can do with Howell Mountain fruit.
You know, recently taking over the Chenin Blanc Viognier will be a new challenge, you know, kind of just diving deep into everything I can learn on the vineyard side, as well as kind of some of the business side of it too.
On today's podcast, I'm joined by two talented female winemakers as we celebrate International Women's Day. My first guest will be Danielle Cyrot, who has had an enviable career, now providing her talents at CADE Estate Winery on Howell Mountain, and Colleen FitzGerald, the enologist and winemaker at Pine Ridge VIneyards in the Stag's Leap District. She's been handed an interesting wine project and a sparkling brand that is their first label added in 25 years. Because of the current outdoor tasting mandate, my first guest, Danielle Cyrot, and I were able to sit in CADE's indoor tasting room, which features a wide floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the expansive Vaca mountain range to the southeast. However, the double doors leading outside were open, and you'll hear some of the tasters having a good time in the background. I started with Danielle by inquiring about an interesting fact I read about her family heritage, which was owning a vineyard in Burgundy, France. But Danielle didn't find out about it until she was ready to embark on her wine education.
Well, I have a French father and an Irish mother, so wine was always part of our dinner table. And my parents always, would enjoy a glass of wine with dinner. And certainly when we were visiting with my grandparents in France, a thimble full of wine was always there, as my grandmother used to say. But I didn't really know of my real family history in wine until I went to UC Davis and started taking a few classes in wine, and was telling my dad, oh, I really like this wine thing. I think maybe this is what I want to get my degree in. And he's like, oh, well, it's in your blood. Your great-grandfather owned a vineyard in Burgundy and Pommard, and, your family is really a lot about wine. It just skipped a few generations, and I went, oh, okay, well, then I guess I was kind of meant for this.
Did they lose the land? Or because usually in Burgundy, when you own a vineyard, it's there for generations.
Yes. Well, my great-grandfather lost two sons during the war and decided that he just couldn't continue the operation, and so he donated it to the Hospice de Beaune, the charitable organization in France. And so there is wine still made from my family vineyard under the Cyrot name, but of course they're not going to give us the vineyard back anytime soon, but that's okay.
Can you at least get the wine at a discount?
No, no discounts.
So when you went to Davis initially, were you thinking about another career choice?
I was thinking about doing physical therapy. So I'm an avid skier, and thought, what a great way to kind of combine skiing and physical therapy. But then once I got to Davis, I found, in fact, my freshman year, that they had a class called Introduction to Wine. And I thought, oh, that sounds really cool. Maybe I can learn how to read a wine label, learn about, wines around the world. And it was taught by Carol Meredith.
Yeah.
And I just caught the bug, and I said, this is what I want to do. I changed my major and never looked back.
Yeah, like your dad said, that stagnant DNA in your system came to life, didn't it?
Exactly.
Wow,
exactly.
That's crazy. And then once you received your degree in viticulture and enology, you went to a couple places around the world, although not Burgundy, though.
I did. So I worked in Alsace and then worked in Australia, in South Australia, in McLaren Vale.
Nice.
And working in France was amazing. I really wanted to spend some time at a winery, and not just a couple of weeks picking grapes. I really wanted to experience the winemaking season. And so the place I worked at was Domaine Sip Mac, and it was actually a student of Professor Anne Noble who had married a Frenchman, and they started this winery, Domaine Sip Mac. It was his family's winery, but she invited me to stay for 3 or 4 months. I was there, and I worked side by side with Jacques, the winemaker, and his brother who ran the vineyard. And then, I was babysitting the kids at night, and we would have family dinners, and
Nice.
It was just a great experience, and I learned a lot about really just trusting terroir, trusting the place in which the grapes are growing.
Okay.
Because that was really what their philosophy was about. The winemaker is only there to guide those grapes along a path. It's not about manipulating them and changing them and trying to make them into something else. It was really about just, these grapes have been growing here for hundreds of years. Trust it.
Yeah.
Kind of a mentality.
They have an idea of what they're doing.
They have an idea of what they're doing. And then I worked in Australia, in McLaren Vale, and it was kind of like the total opposite of, we're going to take these grapes and we're going to make them taste amazing because we've got all of these techniques and all of these tricks up our sleeve to kind of to work our magic on these wines. So
What varieties were they working with?
mostly Shiraz, but they did some Sauvignon Blanc and some Chardonnay and some Cab.
Okay.
Yeah. 2 really cool experiences. I had a great time just traveling the world.
Well, how nice that you got to see both aspects of winemaking, too.
I got to see both aspects and wanted to come back and settle down and really kind of work on my craft, if you will.
Right, yeah.
So.
She's Danielle Cyrot of CADE Winery. Following those 2 knowledge-building experiences in Alsace and Australia, she returned home and landed her first job at Stag's Leap Winery. What a great opportunity that was.
Yeah, I was there for 6 years. I started as enologist and worked my way up to assistant winemaker and enjoyed making Petit Syrah and Cabernet Sauvignon, and they made a beautiful Viognier. It was my first real job out of college and a great place to land.
I had no doubt.
So Robert Britton was a winemaker and was really my mentor and taught me to trust my palate. And, because at that point in my, career, it was kind of like, how do you know if you're doing the right thing? How do you know if people are going to like this wine that I'm making? And he really taught me to just trust your palate.
Your first winemaking appointment was at the sister winery, St. Clement.
I started there really at an interesting point of the winery. Treasury had owned the winery for a couple years, but they weren't really utilizing it to its full potential, I felt like. So they kind of gave me a shot to try some new things. I got to make a bunch of single vineyard wines, and I loved working with St. Clement. It was an awesome property. We had amazing growers that we worked with, and it was really where I was able to experiment and play around with a lot of different things, and they allowed me to do that.
Great. So working at Treasury, which is an international company, did you find any challenges as a woman trying to make headway in the business there?
When I was there, we actually had several female winemakers. Lori Hook was the winemaker for Beringer, and Margot van Stavern was the winemaker at Chateau Saint Jean. So I had, 2 kind of role models to look at to say, yeah, this is a company that supports women. They support women in the winemaker role. But I think the challenge is a little bit having to prove yourself that, yes, you can do this. And it's a very physical, demanding job. And harvest is intense. You're out in the vineyards trying to figure out, is this the right time to pick? And then you're in the cellar and you're dragging hoses and you're moving equipment around and you're crushing grapes and you're working crazy hours.
For 12 to 16 hours.
So 12, 16 hours a day, 7 days a week for 3 months. And so there's an intensity about that. And I feel like that was always something you had to prove, that you were willing to put the time in and and the energy into. But that is part of what I enjoy about the job as well. I enjoy the physicality of it, that you're not just sitting behind a desk.
Yeah, by no means.
By no means.
Winemaker Danielle Cyrot of the respected CADE Estate Winery. She's been there since 2012 and not long ago opened 13th Vineyard, an historic property they acquired.
13th Vineyard was a property we bought in 2016. It's essentially an extension of CADE. It is on Howell Mountain, practically adjacent to CADE Estate. It was formerly the Ladera property. And in 2016, it kind of approached us and said, are you interested? And we said, of course we are, because it's 82 acres of Howell Mountain, Cab, Petit Verdot, Malbec, and a little bit of Sauvignon Blanc. And It has a beautiful historic winery that was built in 1886. It's
Nice.
a gravity feed winery, so it has 3 levels and a beautiful stone building.
Were they using it at the time?
Yes.
It's still in use.
Yes. And so we closed on the property on September 30th, 2016. Literally, we kind of handed the keys over and we were crushing grapes the next day. And we were working side by side with the Ladera crew. So it was CADE, Ladera in the same building making wine. Some of the fruit went to Ladera, some went to us, and some was actually sold to another winery. So for that first year, we were kind of, working together to make wine. And obviously we saw that, wow, we do kind of do things a little differently, which is fine and great. And that's why the wines are great. But eventually Ladera moved out. We took over, brought in, our team, and brought in some new equipment and some new tanks and fitted it to our needs. But the reason it's called 13th Vineyard is because that property was the 13th bonded winery of California.
The
from
whole state.
1886, yeah.
Wow.
So it was originally built by Brune and Shea, 2 Frenchmen, who had started a winery in Oakville, which is currently the Napa Wine Company, and then decided to come up to Howell Mountain, which in 1886, mind you, this was a huge feat to make wine up on the hill at 1,800 feet in elevation, no electricity.
Hence the gravity flow.
Hence the gravity flow. And then to plant the vineyards on this beautiful red volcanic dirt, which they originally called the winery Nouveau Medoc.
Oh, okay.
So obviously thinking of Bordeaux varieties and Cabernet, which we know is Howell Mountain is the right place for that. Mm-hmm. And to make the wine and then transport the barrels by carriage, horse and carriage down the hill to Oakville, where there was a train station, and from there they would load the barrels up onto the train and they would be shipped to San Francisco or wherever their destination was.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
Danielle Cyrot. Before she started at CADE, their parent company, Plump Jack Collection of Wineries, started bottling wines with screw caps. It's a program they continue to study and pursue.
as the story goes, of course, there's always a story with all of these innovations. Our ownership, Gordon Getty, was celebrating a birthday and had pulled out an amazing 1950 Chateau Margaux from his cellar and opened up the bottle, and it was corked. So that moldy, musty, ruins the wine. And he said, how do we, I own a winery now. We've got Plump Jack. How do we solve this cork taint problem? What can we do? And so the answer at that time was screw caps. It was the only way to absolutely guarantee that you were not going to have a corked bottle of wine.
Yeah, that is one way to guarantee it.
Yes. So that 2 years into it, they bottled the 1997 vintage of Plump Jack Reserve Oakville Cabernet Sauvignon, half under cork and half under screw cap, so that the consumer could see how is the wine changing or evolving or aging, or what is the difference between these two closures. and you had a bottle of each. They sold it in a 2-pack. So you had to buy 1 cork, 1 screw cap. And so we kind of like did this crazy experiment. Nobody was doing that at that time. Nobody was bottling a $100 bottle of Oakville Cabernet under screw cap. And people were calling and saying, "You're crazy. Nobody's going to buy this." And other wineries were calling us saying, "Thank you for doing that. we didn't have the guts to do it, but thank you for attempting this, because we know there was an issue. We knew there was an issue with corks, and we decided that it wasn't acceptable anymore. That we wanted to show consumers that there was another option."
They've certainly been putting a lot of effort into minimizing the TCA in cork.
Absolutely.
And it's down to such a minimal amount of it nowadays.
Corks have definitely gotten better, and in fact now you can have guaranteed TCA-free corks. So they actually individually analyze each cork for trichloroanisole, which is the compound that causes the aroma of moldy, musty smells. And so we actually do that for our reserve wines. We have 100% TCA-free corks, but we are continuing to do the screw cap.
You know, it's one thing to taste those 2 wines together a year or 2 after they're made, but now that it's been over 20 years now, how are they tasting side by side, do you know?
Oh, yes. I get the pleasure of tasting them frequently because, for one, we're curious ourselves as winemakers. How are these aging? But what I will say is that they absolutely age differently. We've done several blind tastings with consumers, with wine writers, with anybody who wants to taste them. So 1 glass is cork, 1 glass is screw cap. You taste them blind. You say, which one do you think is which? And usually the room divides 50-50. Half will say it's cork, half will say it's screw cap, and half of them are right, half of them are wrong.
Interesting.
And then when you say, which do you prefer, the room divides 50-50 again, because it's about what you like.
Right.
And it's your palate.
I could see where there'd be a difference, but you may not be able to tell or discern what the difference is, whether it was cork or screw cap.
When you taste a wine that's been aged under screw cap, it's much more, I would say it's more frozen in time. It's more like the day it was bottled. And when you taste the cork, it has some more of the age characteristics. The fruit leather, the cigar, the softened tannins.
And you may or may not like that. So if you don't, and you're planning on aging wine for a long time, the screw cap would be the way to go in that regard.
Absolutely. So in my cellar, I tend to drink the cork earlier, and I'll cellar the screw cap.
That makes sense.
So 1, you don't have to worry about cork taint. But 2, the second layer of cork, which is kind of what we're trying to work on now with the industry, is how does that cork perform over the life of the wine?
The company has worked with UC Davis and have studied not just cork and screw caps, but synthetic cork as well, which also has reliable properties similar to screw caps. Sure, we all love the romanticism of cork in a wine bottle, but for the collector, what they truly care about is the quality of the wine 10, 20, 30 years from now. CADE Estate Winery was also the first organically farmed LEED Gold certified estate winery in Napa Valley. LEED as in Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. And they're also a Napa Green certified sustainable winery. As I mentioned earlier, Danielle has found herself in an enviable position as the winemaker at CADE.
Yeah, I mean, I feel really lucky that, 1, I was able to find something that I'm passionate about and that I love in wine and winemaking. And 2, I've had a really good career.
Sure.
I really enjoyed my time with Treasury and Stag's Leap and St. Clement, but I feel like CADE is my dream job. This is a beautiful place to make wine and really showcase kind of what Howell Mountain can do and what I can do with Howell Mountain fruit.
Right.
So
And you have that winemaking DNA within you, so you had that supporting you along the way, too.
Yes.
What a pleasure it was to spend over an hour with Danielle Cyrot at CADE Estate Winery. Learn more at cadewinery.com. I'll continue my celebration of International Women's Day and Women's History Month with Colleen FitzGerald of Pine Ridge VIneyards after we take a short break as we travel on the wine road. Our travels on the wine road are continuing. I'm Jeff Davis with a nod to International Women's Day. My next guest is Colleen FitzGerald of Pine Ridge VIneyards in the esteemed Stag's Leap AVA. In the interview, you'll hear about a distinctive project she's working on. Because it was a slightly windy day outdoors, we ended up recording inside their gorgeous wine cave. Yes, a cave can be gorgeous. And off in the background, you'll hear some noises because although there's not much production happening right now, there's always something going on year-round. Right?
Yes, they'll definitely doing a little barrel maintenance here at Pine Ridge.
Usually this time of year, most of the work is outside in the vineyard, isn't it?
Yeah, a lot of it will be, definitely with the pruning season and everything starting to push, hopefully in the next, month or two.
Not in the next week or two.
Hopefully in the next month or two.
Yeah. Boy, this weather has been kind of leading toward another early bloom, isn't it?
It definitely is.
When you were pursuing your biochemistry degree at Cal Poly, did you have wine industry in mind at that time, or did you get pulled into that direction?
When I studied biochemistry, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do quite yet. I knew I wanted to do something that kind of added the science with the art, and being so close to Paso Robles, I saw a lot of job openings like for harvest, and when I graduated, I applied for some full-time jobs at in other industries and stuff, but winemaking really kind of lended itself, and then I got my first job in Paso and then just fell in love with the wine industry.
Yeah, you worked a harvest in Paso, is that what I said?
I did work a harvest in Paso, yeah.
And then you jetted off to New Zealand.
Yeah, well, I came up to Napa first, so I did a harvest in Paso, and then I came up to Napa and did a harvest up here at Pine Ridge, and then went to New Zealand, and then came back to Pine Ridge. Yeah, so it was definitely, I enjoyed my harvest at Pine Ridge so much that I wanted to come back, but I love that travel aspect of winemaking, that you can go to a whole new region and be able to work with other great varietals in a different, we make Sauvignon Blanc here, but that's completely different from Sauvignon Blanc in New Zealand. Yeah.
That's one of the greatest and most enviable things about being in the wine industry is getting to travel like that.
Yeah.
And did you get paid, or were you just an intern?
I was paid as an intern, yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, but the working holiday visa, being an American citizen, you can live over there for a year, and I did a little woofing afterwards where you work for, that's non-paid, but they house you and
feed you?
And feed you.
Yeah.
And so you work for 4 to 6 hours a day, and then you get housed and fed, and you can do that as long as you want. So it's kind of a unique experience.
Wow, great. And how perfect that you came back to Pine Ridge and you ended up getting hired here.
Yeah, the team here is great. I really enjoyed working with the whole team, and I've had such a ability to grow here. Starting off just as a seasonal lab tech, and then now running the Chenin Blanc Viognier program.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a little bit. That's exciting. Since this is in celebration of International Women's Day, I have to ask, as you've been in the business not as long as others, like Danielle, who we just spoke with. She's been in it a lot longer, so I think the male aspect was a little different back then than it is these days. But did you find any blowback from men or any challenges being a female in the business?
There's always, I found some as I've gone, but I have a great mentor in Michael Bolak, who was a winemaker here at Pine Ridge up until recently. He really helped foster kind of my career and helped me really grow. And so I'm very grateful to have him still as a mentor. He's really helped me to kind of understand what the whole winemaking aspect is, and gave me the project of Chenin, and was always there to help me, but really was like, okay, this is yours now.
Yeah, so as an assistant winemaker and enologist, you've been involved with this project that you're talking about, and it's your Chenin Blanc and Viognier program that was handed to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a program to take care of because, it's been around for 25 years. It has this history of an experimental blend that Gary Andrews, the founder of Pine Ridge, started. And there's a lot of folklore stories about how it happened. But it's this great marriage between something found in the Chenin Blanc found in Loire and Viognier found in Rhone, both the French backbone. But in France, nobody's doing that. Nobody's putting that together, and it just they marry so well.
And you're also involved with the vineyard aspect of it as well?
Yeah, so I go out to Clarksburg and Lodi quite a bit, make sure that everything is farmed the way for the best possible quality. Chenin out in Clarksburg is where, Cabernet is king in Napa, Chenin is king in Clarksburg. That just, the climate and the soils just really, show for such a great, they really show the characteristics of Chenin so well.
Yeah. There's some interesting varietals being grown in Clarksburg. That's an interesting wine region.
Yeah. And the more I go out there, then the more the different grapes that I see, and then like the different wineries popping up, like the Sugar Mill is just an adorable little tasting room, and there's probably got to be about 10 wineries in there, and you can just go and kind of taste what people are doing.
Mm-hmm. I just took a sip of the Chenin Blanc, and it's really nice. It's a lovely wine. It has a little bit of the kind of a citrus character, mid-palate, and some stone fruit. That's what I'm getting.
That's kind of how I think about it a lot. The Chenin is kind of the acid-driven part of it, and then the Viognier kind of brings a lot of that stone fruit and the floral characters. I sometimes get like a savory aspect of like some ginger in it as well, which I think comes from the Chenin. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And your sparkling is also very good. They do play well together, don't they?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, thank you. So the sparkling is our newest project. It's taking the Cremant style, or the Cremant out in Loire, and really kind of using the Chenin as the base. We pick these grapes specifically for the Chenin, or the sparkling, so they're made differently. The Chenin is 96% in the sparkling, and it's 80% in the still wine, and so the grapes come specifically for making a sparkling wine.
Mm-hmm. It's funny, you were telling us beforehand that you weren't really interested in making sparkling because you like it so much. You didn't want to have to deal with the other side of the business and just enjoy it.
Yeah, it takes some of the romanticism away, like knowing, but then, but now being on the other side after saying that is like, I get to taste other sparkling wines and kind of pick them apart a little bit more, and understanding what's happening in all the different processes as well.
It's kind of similar to when I was in music radio back quite a while ago. I didn't want to work at a radio station that played music that I liked because I didn't want to get tired of it, So
exactly.
I enjoyed working in top 40 because I wasn't really listening to top 40 at home and in the car, so it worked out much better that way.
Yeah. Well, they always say, to make great wine, you have to love a great beer, because during harvest you're tasting all the time, and and you don't want to get burnt out on it.
Right. Yeah. And they say it takes a lot of good beer to make great wine.
Yeah. Exactly.
Especially around harvest. Yeah. Well, I hear your blend is quite popular here at Pine Ridge, which is interesting that we're in the middle of Stag's Leap Wine District, and Cabernet is king, and certainly Sauvignon Blanc, but here you guys are kind of forging your own path.
Yeah, it's been the experimental wine that I was talking about earlier, Gary Andrews, there used to be, the roots of Chenin Blanc, there used to be a lot of Chenin Blanc in the Napa Valley. Back in the 80s, it was
kind of the older varietal that was planted years ago.
Yeah. And so that's kind of where this came from. So it did kind of start out as a Napa Chenin Blanc, and then as kind of we realized what was going out in the Delta and in Clarksburg about the climates out there, and like Chenin really does thrive out there.
Are there other varietals that you'd like to be working with at some point?
That's a hard question. I'm really trying to dive deep into the Chenin and the Viognier right now and kind of really understanding exactly what's going on. I've only been in the industry about 9 years, and so I still feel like I have a lot to learn, even just with these two varietals.
Yeah. Okay, let me ask you this question. When you're at home and you're not drinking sparkling, what are you drinking?
My red of choice right now is a Pinot,
Okay.
the Pinot Noir. So I enjoy kind of the really being able to taste the terroir and all the different Pinots, where they're coming from. Whether it's Oregon or Sonoma Coast or the Central Coast.
They have such a variety to them, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you could say that about Cabernet as well and others, but Pinot it just seems to be across the board.
Yeah, I was up in Oregon a couple years ago, and we were talking to somebody in a tasting room, and we were tasting different Pinots, and they were talking about a project that they were doing where there was 3 different wineries that all exchanged like 1 ton of fruit, and then they all made it their own way and then came back together and tasted them, and they were saying it was really the terroir that like spoke to everybody, that like although it tasted a little bit different with the winemaking styles, like that was ultimately the base, was where the fruit came from.
I love that idea of several winemakers creating their own brand of wine from one vineyard. Although the soil, the climate, and all that went into growing the grapes was the same, the wines can be quite a bit different from one winemaker to another, yet delicious versions of the grape variety. Now, back to Colleen.
At this point in your career, how do you see your future going? You got a long one ahead of you.
I do. So, kind of just working my way up to learning everything I can. Recently taking over the Chenin Blanc Viognier will be a new challenge, kind of just diving deep into everything I can learn on the vineyard side, as well as kind of some of the business side of it too. I came from the science background, so I don't have a lot of that kind of business character or know a lot of the business side. So really going to be enjoying learning that as well.
At this point in California, only about 14% of winemakers are women, and quite a bit fewer are in top executive positions. I asked Colleen if she sees herself attaining that level at some point in her career.
Yeah, maybe. I think, I love being out in the vineyard and love being in the cellar and doing that, all the tactile and being there for the day-to-day right now. But, as I kind of progress in my career, I do see that would be a step I would want to take. That's definitely where I'm going.
Cool. Well, call me when you get to that position at some point and say, I made it.
I will.
So if a 17-year-old woman came to you and said, I'm going to college and I'm thinking about the wine industry, what would you say to her?
I would say go for it. I think not just believing in yourself and knowing that there's other people out there wanting to succeed, and I think, traveling is huge in the wine industry, especially in the production and doing the vintage to vintage, and just, start going to a couple of vintage, even if you don't think you can do it, just like go and try it. And then, because there's multiple instances that I can think of that somebody's been like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. I'm like, well, just try it, try it. If you can't do it, then you can't do it, but we work when we're lifting barrels, we work as a team no matter who you are, so there's 2 people lifting a barrel and, and it gets exhausting, but, it's such a fun and rewarding business to be in, that you can really, you can make it whatever you want. Yeah, you can be out on the floor, you can be up in the lab, you can, be making decisions, you can do whatever you want.
I heard that if you're thinking about getting into the wine business, you definitely need to do at least one or several harvests.
Definitely.
That's a good starting point. And if you don't like that, then even if you just want to be a winemaker or work in the lab, you still have to have some effort there.
And harvest is such a unique time. There's so many hours you're spending with the same group of people. You're working 6 days a week. It's only for a couple of months, but it is a time of year you have to enjoy. If you don't enjoy it, then you're not going to enjoy the wine industry.
And during harvest, it's an all hands on deck kind of situation too. So generally, no matter what you're doing, you're still putting in the hours. And
yeah, definitely.
Possibly doing some heavy lifting.
Yeah, and I was telling my supervisor today, like I still enjoy digging out a tank every now and then. I don't do very many during the season, but but like that's kind of that whole collaborative team effort of, making sure that if like the cellar's tired and they need a break and they need somebody to dig out a tank, like if you're there and you're available and you have the time, getting it done, And so that means doing whatever you need to do for, the greater good of the winery.
Yeah. Getting off the topic a little bit now, is your project of dealing with the Viognier and the Chenin Blanc. When you work in the vineyard, you have to go off site. You're not doing it here. Not even in Napa Valley when you have to go to Clarksburg.
Yeah.
So kind of a little vacation for you, maybe, of some sort.
I've got my kind of little routine that I go out there and where I stop for coffee and where I eat lunch. But it's definitely, I like going over there. I like being based out in Napa, and I like, having that whole community. But I also like going out there where it's a little bit old farming over there. And I mean, the Chenin is a wall of Chenin. We're pulling, whereas like all of our estate grapes at Pine Ridge, they're 2, 3, 4 tons per acre. Out there, we're looking closer to like 8, 10 tons per acre. So, we're up there.
Yeah, wow.
But it can really, the Chenin it's a big berry, it's a big cluster, it can hold kind of that, and then you still get all of those aroma characteristics off of them still.
I can tell she really enjoys working with the Chenin Blanc and Viognier, and I imagine once she gets going on another project, she'll attack it with the same determination as she does currently. Colleen FitzGerald. See her, the other wine, and the beautiful vineyards of Pine Ridge at pineridgevineyards.com. It was a real pleasure recording today's show, and we've reached the end of it. Find more interviews at onthewineroad.com. See my other ventures on Facebook /OnTheWineRoad and Instagram @JDWineRoad. Continue to play it safe, but get out there and support our wineries and restaurants. And I'll catch you next time on The Wine Road. I'm Jeff Davis.
Hosting for this podcast is generously provided by Transistor at transistor.fm.